So, the Hanover School Division, which is in Steinbach, Manitoba, had a meeting of their school trustees this week. They had this meeting because a grade 12 student in that division named Mika Schellenberg came forth with an appeal. And what Mika wanted was for the school board to change a policy they have that treats homosexuality as a sensitive concern and prohibits elementary and middle school teachers from talking or teaching about same-sex people in their classrooms. I wasn't going to post a video this week because given what happened in Orlando, it just didn't seem appropriate. But given what happened in Orlando after reading this news, now it does seem appropriate to make a video, and I'm about to go off. And I'm talking mainly to people like myself and myself. I am talking to the straight cisgender parents out there and the straight cisgender teachers and all the straight cisgender folks who are involved with kids. So if you don't fall in that group, you're welcome to stay while I rant, but if you don't want to, that's fine too. But yeah, it's on. These 9 school trustees had a meeting. They each got to say their piece on the issue, and I'm going to be repeating some of the things that they said. And these are quotes that I got from an article in the Carry On, which is a southern Manitoba newspaper, and I'm going to link to that article below. Rick Peters is the vice chair of the trustee board, and Rick had this to say. He said that students, especially those in middle school, are not mentally prepared to comprehend the complexities of sexual preference. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We introduce children to sexual and romantic orientation from the time they're little, and I'm going to talk more about how we do that in a little while. But I will also point out that kids in middle school, some of them, actually a lot of them, are already starting to have preliminary experiences with sexual and romantic feelings. It's called having crushes on people. And some of those middle school students are going to be gay, and they're going to be already experiencing attraction to other people of their same gender. And yeah, of course it's going to be confusing for them if you've never talked to them about it before. Okay, and maybe when you start talking to them about it, you don't use phrases like the complexities of sexual preferences, but that's our job as adults. We teach children things so that they can make sense of what they're feeling and what they're seeing and what's going on in the world. That's what teaching is. Rick Peters also says that he doesn't agree with Schellenberg's appeal, but that he shouldn't be labeled as homophobic because phobia indicates fear, and that he's not afraid, he just doesn't agree with that lifestyle. Number 1, what does that mean that you don't agree with that lifestyle? It's something that I constantly hear straight people saying, that if people are homosexual, they have a lifestyle. Well, they're not a monolith. They're people. In the same way that we as straight people have all kinds of different lifestyles and make all kinds of different choices and decisions and have all sorts of different behavior around our sexual and romantic preferences, so does everybody else. The only common denominator there is that these are people who are same gender attracted. And if that's what you mean when you talk about lifestyle, well, I can't make you like it, but you're an educator. You don't just get to pretend that entire groups of people don't exist because you don't happen to like something about them. Years ago, educators didn't like the fact that black people existed. And yeah, they made policy based on their own personal dislike of that fact. And when we look back on those policies and that behavior, do you know what we call that? We call it bigotry. Lynn Barkman is another school trustee who had some stuff to say about this. Now, according to a different article I read at cbc.ca, which I will also link to down in the comments, Lynn Barkman is also a nurse, so she wanted to speak up in her capacity as a healthcare practitioner. She talked about a link between the rise of sexual education in Toronto and a rise in cancer rates. And she said something about how this broke her heart and she did not want to see the same thing happen in Steinbach. She said, and I quote, I just feel there is enough cancer around and the increase in cancer is phenomenal. What? Okay. I'm gonna drop some facts on you right now. Fact. Sex education here in Canada is not mandated by city. It's mandated by province. So I don't even know what the rise of sex education in Toronto means. Fact. Yes, we have had changes to our sex education curriculum here in Ontario. Those changes went into effect in September of 2015. In a lot of classrooms, the sex education portion wasn't even taught until a couple of months ago. So it's way too soon to identify any sort of effect that this new curriculum has had because it's only been in place for a few months. And this connection to cancer, I don't even know what that's all about. I just don't know what connection you're making between talking to children about the fact that, yeah, some people are attracted and love people of the same gender and a rise in cancer. So can I hit you with some more facts? According to a 2015 study, so this is a super recent study released by the Government of Canada and the Canadian Cancer Society, 89% of new cancers are diagnosed in people over 50. 1% of new cancer diagnoses occur in children between the ages of 0 and 19. The report also goes on to say that the most commonly diagnosed cancers in children between the ages of 0 and 14 years old are leukemia, cancers of the central nervous system, and lymphoma. None of those cancers have any connection to sexual illness or sexual activity. Even if they did have some connection to sexual activity, or more specifically some connection to same-gendered sexual activity, that's not a reason not to talk to kids about it. Not talking to kids about same-sex attraction doesn't make them not gay. It just means that they don't have any information. Finally, a trustee named Sue Dorskin, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. Sue also says that matters of sexual orientation and gender identity should not be singled out and afforded beneficial treatment. That's almost bordering on indoctrination if we are enforcing that in all of our children and putting that in their lives constantly. I am heterosexual, and if you're like me and you're straight, then there's probably a reasonable chance that, like me, you have for your entire life felt that that part of who you are is normal. And that's not just an accident or a coincidence or something that was just in the atmosphere that we absorbed. We see ourselves, or we see our sexual preferences or our romantic orientation or whatever you want to call it as normal because from the time that we were infants, we've been taught that it's normal. And by taught, I don't mean that someone necessarily sat down with us and said, here is the dictionary definition of heterosexuality. What I'm talking about is that from the time we were super, super little, people read books to us with mums and dads, and we saw TV shows with people who were married and men and women and boys and girls having relationships. It was in the way that, our parents didn't have any problem explaining family relationships to us and telling us that Auntie Pearl was married to Uncle Leroy. We learned it when our parents let us go to the weddings of our straight friends and families. And maybe sometimes we didn't just go, but we actually got to participate and we got to be little flower people or little ring-bearing people, and we were super adorable and everybody oohed and awed and said how wonderful it was. We have it in our teaching materials already. When you have a textbook or a reader, and again, there is mom and dad. We already teach this to children. It's just that it's all focused around heterosexuality. And by the way, when we give children all of these lessons and inundate them with all of these messages and images and media that tell them, hey, when men and women get together and love each other and kiss and hug and hold hands and make families, that's all normal. We don't call that indoctrination. We just call that life. And this is not just to call out everybody else. I mean, this is something that I have to remember and be aware of too. I mean, I remember when our son was just an infant and my partner and I had just brought him home from the hospital and my partner was holding him and he was just talking to him about, what his life might be like. And he said something along the lines of, one day you might meet a woman or a man and you might get married and have your own baby. And I was the one who sort of startled and had to do a double take because I was like, right, of course. Because in my head, I was just assuming that this little baby was straight. Like, I just assumed that. If my partner had just said, oh, someday you may meet a woman and get married, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. So we do it from the time our kids are super little. We make these assumptions about who they are and their identity. And that's a huge problem. You know what? I, like a lot of straight people this week, have been talking about how I stand with the LGBTQ community and, how sad I am and how I'm mourning and this is a tragedy. But you know what? It's not enough for us to say, we stand with you in this moment and we're here for you and we grieve with you and we're all Orlando. And yet in our classrooms, we say, well, there's something that's so fundamentally wrong or weird or dangerous or incomprehensible about you that we don't even dare mention it or talk to our children about it or let them know that you exist until they're 14 or 15 years old. And I also want to say something as a Canadian, because as a Canadian, it's really tempting and it's really easy to feel a little bit smug and self-righteous in a situation like this, which is something that I have caught myself doing this week. It's pretty easy to look at Americans and an incident that happened in America and go, oh yeah, well, we're really lucky because we live in Canada and we're so progressive. We have gay marriage and we've had it for over a decade and we don't have the same issues around gun control. And yes, I do believe that a big part of this is a gun control issue, but there were also underlying issues that prompted that person, I'm not going to say their name, that prompted that person to pick up that gun and walk into that club and target those people. They were in a gay club. It's not okay. We have to do better than this. It's not okay for us to wait until 49 innocent people are lying dead on the floor of a nightclub before we're willing to call this what it is, which is prejudice and hatred. It is not okay to wait until 49 people are lying dead on the floor of a nightclub before we're willing to say, you know what, this isn't acceptable. And it's not okay to wait until these 49 people are lying dead on the floor of a nightclub to acknowledge that they're human beings. Every single one of those people had a life, and we're learning about them now in the media, and we're crying, and we're weeping, and we're sympathizing with their families and feeling terrible. But you know what? Every single one of those people was a child once. And if they were children today and they were in this classroom, and if they were in a lot of our classrooms, a lot of us would be saying, you know what? We don't want to talk about who you are. We don't want to talk about your life. We don't even want to acknowledge it because we think somehow by saying it out loud or by giving it a name, it's going to hurt the other kids. It's not okay. If we really stand with the LGBTQ community and we really do embrace them and we really do recognize that they are just our fellow citizens of the world, then we need to do that from the get-go. And we as parents and families and teachers have this amazing opportunity when our children are young to teach them that, you know what? we're all human beings and we all deserve the same basic level of respect and acknowledgement. So yeah, come on, let's get on that, you know? Anyway, if you made it through my extensive ranting, thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts on this issue that you want to share, please feel free to comment. And I know that a lot of folks out there are having a really rough week and are having a really rough time with that. And I just want to extend my sympathy, which is, I know doesn't mean a lot, but I am thinking of you and you're in my thoughts. And I hope that if you can't have a good week, I hope at least that you have some comfort and some care, whether that's self-care or care from someone else. And for those of us who do want to stand with the LGBTQ community, then I encourage you to check in with your friends and family who may be having a hard time. See if there's something they need, see if there's some way you can support them. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this for now. Thank you for listening, and I will see you soon. Bye.